Hello, welcome to the participants of our forum, the forum that is meant to sum up the situation with the security of cultural heritage, the situation with cultural heritage since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. Almost every participant of this forum has put a lot of effort into ensuring that this war would affect the preservation of cultural heritage that we are meant to maintain as little as possible. War in Ukraine, a fight for culture, is an event that serves not only to summarize, but also to define certain priorities. It is a tool for us to see each other, to communicate with each other, and I guess better communicate with each other in our activities within our wonderful mission to preserve and pass on what we have stories. I have the honor of inviting Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, Alexander Tkachenko, to open our forum. Hello, colleagues. Thank you for this initiative. I think that the name of this forum, Fight for Culture, contains the majority of messages which are trying to convey to the rest of the world of what we are living through during Russia's full-scale invasion into Ukraine. Unfortunately, due to the scale of destruction that Ukraine is living through, it's basically unprecedented since the Second World War. Multiple cultural items have been destroyed or damaged since the beginning of the full-scale war, including hundreds of museums, libraries, and other cultural facilities. And the situation changes every day because Russians are destroying everything every day. As we know, many objects of cultural heritage were targeted on purpose. These deliberate attacks, just like the prohibition and burning of Ukrainian books, removing Ukrainian documents and valuables, are all signs of a cultural genocide. Deportation, moving Ukrainian children to Russia, persecution and physical destruction of Ukrainians, including cultural figures, shows the true goals of the Russian regime, which are not just about the territories. The armed aggression of this scale is an enormous challenge for all authorities. Such a major theft has not taken place since the Second World War. And the scale of evacuation of cultural objects is unprecedented. Thanks to the synergy between the authorities and the public, ensure that we can maintain our society and our culture. The current situation with preservation of cultural valuables is quite difficult. At the same time, the war has shown that cultural heritage is one of the key elements of the national security. That is why our ministry has come out with a proposal to change the law on national security and to adopt two framework laws to reflect this in the legislation. The efforts of the minister during this time were also aimed at ensuring international aid for the cultural sector, and we have examples of a lot of equipment we have received to protect our cultural heritage through our UNESCO nomination and through communication with international organizations and assistance. We have received aid to evacuate cultural valuables, to come up with algorithms to assess the damage, to establish cooperation with law enforcement and the military. We are working on the issue of recovering the cultural objects deported by Russians, both during the full-scale invasion and before. We would also like to establish a department that would take care of these issues. Odessa has now been included on the list of World Cultural Heritage at Risk. We are developing a register of museum funds and a register of immovable cultural heritage with the support of our international partners. We are still receiving financial support from our international donors and professional organizations as primary assistance to cultural institutions and cultural figures. We are also carrying out stabilization measures. As for conservation, we have memorandum of cooperation with Louvre Museum, and we have multiple agreements to support the preservation of cultural heritage and its promotion abroad. We are thankful to everyone who is helping us preserve our cultural heritage, both with their vocation and with their professional duty. We are thankful to our international partners and donors whose representatives are now among speakers of the forum. We are thankful to social society organizations, and we are thankful to activists and volunteers who are helping us. We are thankful to everyone who is helping to deliver humanitarian aid, packaging materials, and equipment to the cultural institutions of Ukraine. This assistance is highly valuable. Our history and services that are critical for people's lives. We honor the memory of every defender. Unfortunately, our sector has also suffered great losses. We are thankful to the armed forces of Ukraine for the opportunity to work. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We have improvement of legislation ahead of us, as well as action that we need to take before entering the EU. We also have to think of reintegration of the occupied territories. And culture is among the factors that will help us increase our defense. Today's event will help us analyze the experience of this difficult year at war and to specify further algorithms and mechanisms. I'm thankful to the organizers and partners of the forum, and I wish that we have a fruitful discussion. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to Heroes. Thank you, Alexander, for this introduction and for this very profound overview of the situation. The Ministry of Culture is our key partner. And among other participants, including leaders and workers of museums, libraries, archives, leaders of initiatives, representatives of local authorities, the armed forces of Ukraine, and of course, international institutions and organizations. And this is a list of very different organizations, very different participants. And during this process, it is most important to coordinate among different institutions, different initiatives. Now I would like to invite Katerina Chuyeva, Deputy Minister of Culture Information Policy, who works on these coordination processes, among other things. We see these efforts that are being put into doing as much as possible and as effectively as possible. Katerina, welcome. Hello, dear colleagues. First, I would like to thank the initiators of this forum, particularly Ihor Poshevail and Olga Salo, particularly because they were the ones who ensured that this initiative is taking place, even though it is very quick. The opportunity of joint meeting in this format, in the discussion format, is very important. During these almost 12 months, I cannot even count how many times we had various online meetings on Zoom since the end of February last year. I think that like thousands of meetings already, and mostly we were speaking about who managed to do what, but we weren't speaking enough about further coordination. With time, it became clear that we really need such meetings, because I am deeply convinced that none of the parties that contribute to the preservation of cultural heritage, be it the national authorities, civil society institutions, local authorities, professional organizations, local and national alike. Each of us could not do this alone, could not do as much as we can do when we achieve a certain synergy. Today, it is very difficult for us to speak about a viable ecosystem of culture or a narrower ecosystem of cultural heritage, but our task is it because an ecosystem is the key to make sure that all our efforts and all our interests, opportunities, and needs are balanced, and all participants have sufficient resource to achieve certain goals.
The war has brought challenges that probably none of us have ever thought about facing in our life. That is why for each and every one of us, it was a professional challenge, taking into account that all the resources of the state and civil society are limited. So here I would like to thank all those who, on their behalf, have initiated with Ukraine and from abroad, all our organization partners from all the countries and professional organizations from all over the world. I am grateful to all those who have initiated these processes to provide us help. Without your help, stabilization of the situation with cultural heritage would be impossible. Without taking into account activists involving activists, public officials, it would be impossible to reach those results that we have reached today. Our losses would be much, much bigger. That is why, let me tell you that this forum is very important. We have a lot of expectations from this event. We have worked a lot, but we haven't discussed it a lot among us. It is also a problem because everyone is very busy here inside the country, especially those who are located closer to the front line. It's very difficult to think about the future, to develop a strategy, to take into account those things which are not related to the here and now. Such forums, and I hope this is the first event from a long series of events that we'll be able to conduct, will help us find time and to talk to each other. There are a lot of things, as one of famous people said, the government must do those things that no one can do. My professional task, including after this forum, is to find those areas that are least protected, those that cannot be solved only thanks to international partners and civil society activists. They require governmental attention. This is a slow process because all the efforts of the state are focused right now on something else. And we have not only to protect our cultural heritage here and now, but we have to overcome those things that were left for us by our previous governments, because these things, protection of the cultural heritage, was not on the list. That is why I would like to sincerely thank you for coming here, for being with us today and tomorrow. Thank you so much. All those who will take part in working groups, I hope that we'll identify our tasks in the nearest future, that we will make conclusions. Probably we will try to talk, to vent our frustration, because of course, when all of us work in a very narrow area, we do not always notice that maybe some people also work in this same area. So our task is to preserve and to develop these understanding, mutual understanding. This is very important for us in Ukraine. It is important for building trust with international partners. We have a lot of work to do. So let's work together. Thank you so much. And I wish you all a productive discussion today. Thank you. Thank you so much, Katerina. I am really sorry for our Ukrainian realities, but we try to work hard even under such conditions. I would also like to thank you Ihor, you are muted. So hope you can hear me now. I would like to sincerely thank everyone who joined this forum. As the previous speakers said, Mr. Minister and Mrs. Vice Minister, this forum is very important. We have met many times with you during different events before, and we have discussed the importance of communication, the importance of mutual understanding, understanding that everyone is effective there where they work. Almost a year has passed since the start of the full-scale invasion. Russians have attacked Ukrainian territory and Ukrainian identity. More than 1,200 objects of infrastructure have been destroyed or damaged. Dozens of thousands of artifacts have been stolen. Millions of people were displaced. Many thousands have died. I'm sorry for these problems with the microphone. It is very important to protect our cultural heritage, and not only Ukrainians, but the entire international community is doing that. For almost a year, international governments, international organizations, institutions cooperate tightly with Ukrainian government, cultural institutions, charitable institutions, volunteers, civil society activists, and the armed forces of Ukraine. They have provided us protective equipment and materials that we need. They have provided us physical and electronic cloud places to preserve our heritage. They have calculated losses, helped us document and record crimes against the culture. The scale of this support is impressive, and we are really grateful to
українському культурному середовищі і кожному з вас, присутніх сьогодні тут з нами. Утім, агресія Росії
present here. The Russian aggression goes on, unfortunately, and the fight for our culture continues. So it's right time to understand whether we are on the same page, to take into account all these lessons learned. This year has changed Ukraine and the entire world. We need to analyze our needs and situations to see strategies for the nearest future and to strengthen strategies and networks, coordinate our efforts. We all do that to preserve our cultural heritage under the conditions of the war, to develop our capabilities, to respond quickly, to support institutions and cultural workers, to bring the aggressor country to the account, to prepare for the recovery, to help develop Ukrainian culture. That is why the headquarters of the Preserving Cultural Heritage, together with our partners, we have initiated this meeting as a platform for dialogue and joint effort. Our forum has almost 190 participants who registered. There are representatives of Ukrainian cultural institutions as well as village libraries. It says this number of people that joined us says that there is a huge need to discuss these questions, to exchange experience, to plan and coordinate our efforts in order to preserve our cultural heritage. That is why let me wish you a very productive day today. This is our cultural Rammstein, and I would like to give it over our international and Ukrainian partners. First, I give it over to Teresa Patricio, the president of ICOMES. They have helped us a lot and continue helping us in different areas. And we are really happy that you are with us. So Teresa, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ihor. Good morning, dear all, Honorable Minister Alexandra Tchaghenko, dear Katerina Shuyeva. It's really a pleasure for me to be here with you today. Of course, allow me, first of all, to thank the Maiden Museum and in particular its General Director, Ihor Pochvailo, for organizing this so important forum on safety of cultural heritage on times of war, this battle for culture. I think you have a very strong title that tells everything. And of course, for inviting ICOMOS to be here with you today as a partner. I also would like to start perhaps to congratulate Ukraine also for the inscription of the Harbor City of Odessa on the World Heritage List. I think it was something very good and very positive that happened. And during political disturbances, cultural heritage has always been increasingly targeted. It has been looted, deliberately destroyed, and it is in order to affect the identity and the confidence of all a nation, and you all know very well about this. The scale of the crisis and the sensitivity of certain situations had shown us the need of mechanisms that allow faster assessments and potential responses, and in particular in cases of crisis where a rapid emergency response is of course of vital importance. So the Russian-Ukraine war has caused widespread damage to all forms of cultural heritage, movable, immovable, tangible and intangible, natural and cultural, which is of course at the core of the Ukrainian identity. So strengthen efforts among Ukrainian Minister of Culture and with heritage organizations and professionals, and these both from Ukraine and abroad, is of course of most importance for the effective preservation of cultural heritage in these terrible times of war. So coordinating efforts will allow to a rapid response capacity, both for protection and risk mitigation, and will allow to the comprehensive preparation for the recovery of Ukrainian cultural heritage. So it is critical that we find ways to ensure that cultural heritage is given a central place in all the agendas, in every program, while talking about the war in Ukraine, and especially while talking about recovery. So ICOMOS has been concentrating its resources and efforts on providing support to our colleagues in Ukraine, and I'm not here to give a list of the work we have been done. Importantly, is that ICOMOS concentrates its efforts to empower cultural heritage as a strategic asset for a diverse, democratic, and in peace world. And so for ICOMOS asserts that cultural heritage are drivers of economic, social, and technological transformation, and of course, fundamental for the construction of cultural identity. A few weeks ago, during the second conference of ministers of culture on the eve of the annual meeting of the World Heritage Forum in Davos, we discussed the importance of a high quality Baukultur. So allow me to tell you some words about that here, because I think it's very important for the future. So this high quality Baukultur will address challenges throughout interdisciplinary, cross-sectoral and multi-level cooperation to jointly find new and improved solutions. And here, I'd like to, in relation to that, I'd like to highlight one of the ICOMOS recent contributions that has a direct link to promoting high quality building, but also a high quality recovery action that links the past with the present and with the future. So under the mandate of the European Commission, ICOMOS has developed what we call the quality principles for EU-funded interventions with potential impact on cultural heritage. And these principles provide full recommendations for all stakeholders. And even though they were established to improve the outcomes of cultural heritage of EU-funded projects. Allow me to emphasize that these principles are really very important to be applied to any kind of projects, to any kind of interventions related to cultural heritage. So the ICOMOS quality principles are very much in place for any planning process and recovery action for Ukrainian cultural heritage. So I think this is an important topic to speak here today. And as recommended by the ICOMOS quality principles, the recognition of cultural heritage as a common good and responsibility should be a precondition of quality, where cultural heritage conservation and protection, so preserving cultural heritage for future generations, should be understood as a long-term investment for society and for quality of life. So ICOMOS stands with you on this, and of course, I'd like to reassure you all of ICOMOS support and our availability to continue collaborating and working with all of you. And I really, my hopes that the forum of today and tomorrow will bring great discussions and sound solutions for future. Thank you very much, Ihor, for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for your inspiring words. Thank you. I would like to invite Chiara, who represents UNESCO in Ukraine. This is an organization that takes part in preserving Ukrainian heritage, especially right now during the war. Chiara, are you here with us? Okay, probably there is some problem with connection. So I give it over to Aparna Tandon, who represents intergovernmental organization that Ukraine has joined several years ago, ICROM. We have conducted a lot of joint programs with this organization in Ukraine in order to document losses. Aparna, please, over to you.
Thank you, Ihor. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Minister for Culture and Information Policy, Mr. Trashenko, Honorable Deputy Minister, Ms. Katerina Chuveva, and of course, Mr. Ihor Poshuvalov, the General Director of Maidan Museum. First of all, congratulations for organizing this forum. And also for, please accept our congratulations for the inscription of Odessa in these tough times onto the World Heritage List. Excellencies and distinguished participants of the forum. Since the beginning of the war, ICROM's Director General and the Council have recognized the urgent need to safeguard Ukraine's tangible and intangible heritage, which is at the core of its national identity. And last year, through a special resolution, ICROM's Council expressed support for the organization's ongoing efforts to work with the professionals on the ground in Ukraine and provide capacity development within the framework of our flagship program, First Aid and Resilience for Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis. In April 2022, ICROM, in partnership with the Ministry of Culture, of Information Policy of Ukraine and Maidan Museum and Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, organized online workshops on developing a collaborative damage and risk assessment methodology for heritage sites and collections damaged or at the risk of destruction. What we hope is what would come out of this effort would be a risk map. And in partnership with UNESCO and Maidan Museum, we also translated our emergency evacuation guidelines. This is a resource that offers a field-tested and simple workflow for emergency evacuation of valuable objects. ICROM is now collaborating with HERI to translate the First Aid to Cultural Heritage in Times of Crisis handbook and toolkit to guide a national strategy for developing procedures for first aid to cultural heritage. In July 2022, with ECOMOS, ICROM undertook a joint mission to Ukraine to support the efforts made by the Ministry of Culture, as well as heritage organizations and professionals in the country in the current conflict situation. We visited the affected sites and carried out a field test of our newly developed Cultural Heritage Damage and Risk Assessment app. And in response to the findings of this mission and the needs identified after the workshop, ICROM's FAR program has further developed the web and mobile-based application, first results of which have been now released and co-published with HERI. In the coming months, we look forward to working with the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, HERI, ICROM member states, European Commission, UNESCO, and ECOMOS to support risk mapping and capacity development for first aid, early recovery, and peace building. We will support efforts on the ground to develop a national strategy, as has also been underscored by the Minister, Honorable Minister, as well as coordination mechanisms to support recovery, rehabilitation, and peace building, which we think will be essential for ensuring a recovery, a sustainable recovery through heritage. ICROM is now working on developing some tools and strategies for mitigation of climate risks and recommends that efforts for first aid and recovery should also aim for net zero. Culture is certainly a source of peace, resilience, and recovery. Culture cannot wait, and we stand by you to ensure that there are capacities on the ground to take on this battle for culture. Thank you so much, and I am looking forward to the discussions in the forum.
Дуже дякуємо, пані Тендон.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tendon.
І перейдемо зараз.
And now we are going to move on to the International Museum Council, which is represented by Diana Perdue, head of the committee that specializes in a situation that we are trying to resolve all together. Diana, over to you. Okay, if Ms. Perdue has not joined us yet, I would like to give the floor in the meantime to Ms. Snezhka Mikhailovich, the representative of the organization that engaged in direct support to cultural figures in Ukraine by providing scholarship to Ukrainian cultural representatives. Over to you, please.
Thank you so much, dear Igor, Mr. Minister, dear Katerina, dear colleagues and friends, greetings from Brussels. How I wish that we could meet all in Kiev in peacetime to discuss how important cultural heritage is, but things are as they are. And I wish to thank you for inviting also Europa Nostra to join this unprecedented mobilization of forces that are fighting in this, as you're saying, that are fighting for values, that are fighting for culture. Everybody is referring to the title of that you have chosen. And indeed, you have not said that this is a battle for Ukrainian culture. You have said it is the battle for culture. And this is exactly what we are talking about. It is the forces of culture against the forces of evil and barbarianism. And that's why we are, I think, equally thankful to you for the resilience, for how you are impressing the world by showing what it means, culture, that it means to people. Because I come from a country which doesn't exist anymore, Yugoslavia, and has 30 years ago also been unfortunately facing a tragic, different types of war. But at that time, 30 years ago, somehow people always said, oh, you know, culture comes after. It's people's of human lives first. But you are showing that culture is people. because the cultural heritage is basically the soul and the heart and identity and the memory of the people. And if we lose that, we lose people as well. So this is indeed a fundamental what we are talking about and this mobilization, but you are leading the mobilization. We are just here to support you in a modest way, but after a year, see how you manage to bring so many organizations together and to keep the dignity. I always remember your participation, Igor and Katarina Chueva, in our summit in Prague in September last year. Everybody was speaking about the dignity in which you have been passing the messages about the importance of cultural heritage, the work that you have been doing, and basically you have given to us as much as we humbly and modestly are giving to you. Europa Nostra is, I also want to thank all my colleagues from various organizations. And of course, we have just heard Teresa Patricio from ICOMOS and then ICROM. They are the ones who have, on the ground have become engaged, and so many other people who provided very concrete help. We, as an organization, are the voice of civil society committed to cultural heritage, and we are the advocates, the lobbyists. So this is the sort of something that we are offering you, our voice to amplify your voices, because we cannot obviously replace what you are doing, and that's what we have been doing from day one. We started, of course, together with so many other people through at level of UNESCO, and calling for Russia, of course, not to chair the World Heritage Committee, and what a joy now to see, thanks to the efforts of everyone, that the international community has put Odessa on the World Heritage List in danger. So this is showing that it's worth joining forces, though we know that many more people still, alas, have abstained and remained not engaged. So we need to convince all that it is our common battle. It's not just supporting Ukraine, it's supporting the humanity and the values of humanity. So advocacy towards UNESCO, and for us, for Europa Nostra, advocacy towards the European Union. This is something that we have been doing whenever we could. We have been calling for placing also the cultural consideration and cultural heritage consideration at the heart of European Union's support to Ukraine. And we have done it at a hearing at the European Parliament, and together with our colleagues from Culture Action Europe and the European Cultural Foundation, calling for a cultural deal for Europe, but also special cultural deal for Ukraine in the context on the relationship and everyday stronger relationship between the European Union and Ukraine, like we have seen very recently with the President and many members of the European Commission were in Kiev to express this very strong bonds. And I was also with Teresa Patricio and many other people in Davos. So she already spoke about that important the declaration that was adopted at the Davos conference on the high quality Baukultur, because the recovery will come. And it's fantastic that you are already now talking about the recovery, though unfortunately the war is not yet over, but this is now we are preparing, and that recovery has to be done on the basis of high quality Baukultur, high quality, like the principles that ICOMOS adopted. And this is something that also Europa Nostra, we are also member of the Davos Alliance Steering Committee. We will always be on your side and advocating for these elements. And only in 2 days, here in Brussels, there will be an important conference in NATO headquarters, and they will also be talking to the military, the highest military authorities at NATO of the importance of cultural heritage. So this is a once again, a very modest contribution and sort of support that organizations like ours can give to this mobilization. And one very symbolic, I just wanted to mention Ihor and Katarina, symbolic action that we have done, also very concrete, and this is the setting up of Heritage Solidarity Fellowship for Ukraine, because there is so much support for sites and institutions, but also the heritage defenders very brave heritage defenders in Ukraine are living in such difficult circumstances. And so we have done for the very first time, we have never done it before, sort of a crowdfunding in order that all our members could bring some resources together, also with the Global Heritage Fund, and then also with extremely important matching support we received from our colleagues from Alif. And we raised roughly 100,000 euro, and we have supported almost 150 Ukrainian defenders with a symbolic support to help them continue their resilience and their action on the ground. And we have done it together with Natalia Musienko, who is there with us, our council member, and Ukrainian, with Harry, of course, Ihor, with your organization, and the Ukrainian Fulbright Circle. So this is, again, an example, just an example of so many actions, concrete actions of support. And last but not least, I'm proud to share with you the fact that we have been selected with a consortium of partners to run the European Heritage Hub that will start somewhere in April. And we will make sure that heritage institutions, professionals, volunteers of Ukraine will be fully part of that mobilization at European level. Katarina, to quote you in Prague when you said, we just want to be like you, all of you, to be part of the discussion on the future of heritage in Europe and the world. And we will make sure that you are really at the heart of this mobilization and of this conversation. We stand by you, and Slava Ukraini.
Glory to the heroes. Thank you, Snezhka, for these words, these inspired words. And indeed, there is a lot of work and there is a lot of support behind these words, very specific support too. I would like to ask our speakers to adhere to the timeline going forward, because we would like to hear from everyone, of course. Unfortunately, it's impossible, but we have an intense agenda ahead of us. We have working groups, and in the future, I would like to give the floor to the director of the institution, which was born from the Prince Claus Fund. It is the a company called Response to Emergencies in Culture. And thanks to the Prince Claus Foundation and the headquarters for heritage protection, during the first weeks of the full-scale war, we were able to start this strategic action, not only tactical action. So, Tanya, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Igor, for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for organizing and being present in this important forum. And if anything, I'm happy to see so many familiar faces, because that is a testimony to the way we have collaborating so closely over the past year. Cultural Emergency Response has worked closely with Ukrainian and international partners to document, evacuate, provide materials, stabilize and winterize to protect heritage impacted by the war. And in total, we have allocated about 1.2 million euros and supported over 100 archives, libraries, museum sites, buildings, but also individuals. And the Heritage Emergency Response Initiative and many, many other Ukrainian partners have been the only reason that we've been able to do this work. So I hope today and tomorrow, besides a moment to connect and learn, can absolutely also be a tribute to the cultural first aiders in Ukraine who have been staying strong and have been given everything to protect their culture and identity. And I'm more than humbled to be working with all of you. At the start of this forum, there's 3 observations I would like to share with you in this short address, which I hope can spark some conversation, inspiration for the discussions coming forward. First of all, I would like to emphasize the best practice and continued importance of coordination. Of course, as we're all sitting at this table, we know how important it is to coordinate, but we also know how difficult it can be to do so. Therefore, I would like to briefly highlight some examples of best practices that we've been seeing over the past year, which could help us move forward. So first, let's continue to coordinate the sharing of information to avoid duplication and rather amplify each other's work. At the moment, there are several coordination groups being brought to life to share information and start conversations on coordination on specific topics, such as digitization and documentary heritage. And I hope we can continue to do so. Secondly, what has been working very well in the past year is the pooling of funding and co-funding efforts. Sarah's been coordinating and implementing a pooled fund to which 12 international institutions have contributed and has co-funded over 6 large-scale projects. And this absolutely helps in the coordination, not only on the international level, but also on the ground. It's more efficient and it's easier to navigate the resources of funding partners can tap into. Lastly, let's also continue to support the coordination initiatives that are on the ground and have the best overview, context, and sense of urgency and priority. Harry, of course, an outstanding example of this, but also NGO Azov, the Museum Crisis Center, Museum for Change, and of course, the municipalities and the Ministry of Culture. And they are the only reason that we've been able to reach institutions who usually have less access to funding initiatives themselves. So without them, it would not be able to reach all the different areas of Ukraine and also make sure that all organizations that are in need have access to the support. This point relates to a second observation I would like to share, which is what we have seen that the continued support to see local coordination initiatives is actually the most sustainable way of moving forward in continued support in the next phase. So over the past year, a strong infrastructure and ecosystem, as Katarina just has said, was built in Ukraine. With the right support, it can last and lead the recovery in the cultural space of Ukraine. And I think it's our job as international community to promote and strengthen this infrastructure that was already created and leverage the expertise that is available in the country itself. This actually brings me to my third and last point, which is promoting not only this infrastructure, but also most definitely the continued need for support for cultural protection and recovery in Ukraine. I know that from several European countries and international other countries have new government packages are being released for the recovery for Ukraine, which can hopefully start very soon. And although there has been an unprecedented visibility and hence attention and awareness for the need to protect culture during the ongoing war, we all know that is important. And I think in our continued efforts as an international community, we can continue to raise awareness for the need to make available cultural resources to make sure that it has a place in the recovery of the country, as we all know how important it is for the recovery of a community, of a nation as a whole. So also a year down the line, we need to make sure that this case is continuously being made. So in other words, and to conclude, let's continue to collaborate, fight and stand strong to protect Ukraine's cultural heritage. And if anything, I can say that Cultural Emergency Response is committed to keep working with Ukraine colleagues and international colleagues as long as it's needed. Thank you.
Дуже дякую, пані Санне. І говорячи справді про доступність.
Thank you very much, Sadne, and speaking about the availability of Ukrainian institutions, their access to help, their access to assistance. I would like to say that this foundation, not only in cities, but also in smaller towns, because this initiative responded to the problems everywhere. I would like to invite Alexandra Fibich.
Good morning from Geneva. Dear Honorable Minister, dear Vice Minister Katerina Chriva, dear organizers, distinguished speakers and participants and cherished partners and friends. On behalf of the International Alliance for the Protection of Heritage and Conflict Areas, also known as ALIF, we want to thank you for inviting us to say a few words at the start of this forum on this important topic that is so close to all of us. Congratulations to Harry, in particular, Ihor Pishovailova, and also his colleagues in Lviv, Vasil Roshko. Harry has been a real motor of the mobilization to protect heritage throughout the country, and we're really we're always very impressed by the work that and the commitment that your organization has put into it. We also want to warmly thank the team from the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, the Vice Ministers, Katarina Chueva, Galina Grigorenko, as well as Anastasia Bondar, who've been committed unfailingly to keep us all together and coordinated. Last week, Alif was on mission in Sarajevo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we had the chance to talk a lot about Ukraine with the cultural heritage professionals in the country, and every single person was immensely impressed by the way and the scale of the work that the Ukrainians have done for the protection of heritage. So I think this conference is very, very timely to take stock and discuss our lessons learned of what we have collectively done over the past year to discuss priorities, working methods as the war unfortunately continues. I'm aware of the time constraints, so I will only present in a few words the work that the Alif Foundation was able to support over the past year. As all of us, we've been mobilized from day one of the conflict, and we've been in contact with the Ukrainian and Polish professionals, with the national authorities, the international organizations, UNESCO, ICROM, ICOM, ICOMOS. And very early on, Alif adopted an action plan for the protection of heritage in Ukraine, with an envelope that today amounts to $5 million. We're very grateful that we had 3 external funding partners who joined to reinforce Alif action: the EU Foreign Policy Instrument, the Principality of Monaco, and the Getty Foundation, who in total supported us for $3 million. To date, Alif has committed more than $3.8 million in direct grants to more than 200 organizations, museums, archives, libraries, conservatories, archaeological sites, helping to purchase much needed equipment, shelves, cabinets, packing materials, fire safety, to be able to properly care for the museum collections and the sites across the country. We've also supported a big international solidarity movement. Museum crates were moved from the city of Geneva, as well as from other partners in Austria, Italy, France, Switzerland, and the UK. We're trying to support as much as possible the heritage institutions to tackle the shortage of the energy. And we continue to stand. I will not make too long of a list. However, there's 2 or 3 initiatives that I still want to highlight that include the 3D documentation and photogrammetry for more than 40 monuments at risk across the country. Monitoring and analysis system that was put in place by the Global Heritage Fund and the University College of London. And as already mentioned by Snezhka, the Ukraine solidarity support that was supported through Europa Nostra. and the HARI organization. So ALIF will continue to stand by the Ukrainian professionals across the country. We will continue to work on 3 priorities: the protection of collection throughout the countries in a concrete and effective way as much as possible, the stabilization of monuments, and the support to heritage professionals across the country. And I'm very happy also to see the representatives of the Museum Crisis Center here, and we would like to applaud their work, very important work across the country. And we will continue to listen to emerging needs and try to respond as quickly as possible to facilitate your work and make it as feasible as possible. We're looking forward to the exchanges and the fruitful discussions. Thank you, сердечно дякую from ALIF.
Дуже дякуємо і вам, пані Олександро, і фонду
Thank you
ALIF
so much, Alexandra,
потужну підтримку
for your support of Ukraine. We also have with us Juliette Raoul-Duval, Vice President of Value. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, all colleagues, to organize this meeting. We are all very involved in Ukrainian colleague support. I just want, do you listen to me? Okay, thank you. I just want to present what ICOM Europe is ready to do to help our colleagues. We have a project supported by 19 countries in different countries in Europe, and also HARI, and also NEMO. And we are ready to organize a very concrete kind of help, and to try to mobilize in our countries qualification and competencies to help to restoration of a destroyed heritage in Ukraine. It's not the only action that ICOM supports, but we are ready to organize a very concrete actions with you. The first initiative we will take, is to make on the 6th of March a meeting within these 19 countries and organizations who wants to work together, and of course to listen to our colleagues in Ukraine to hear what are their concrete needs and what they want us to do to help. The way to help, to our mind, is to maybe send missions, restaurateur professionals to organize missions, either on site if it is possible, either online, to help to concrete action of restoration of collection and patrimony. That is the first action we want to do, and I'm pleased to invite all of you who are interested to follow our meeting. It will not be so dense meeting than today, but it's between professional working in museums who are ready to cooperate together. It will take place at the same time between 12 and 2 p.m. Paris time, and I will send to your organizers a link so that the one who wants could follow and join this help of professional museum in our countries. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Well, we have conducted quite a lot of analysis of needs of museums of Ukraine, and of course we do have several requests. So that is why we'll be pleased to take part in these meetings. Thank you so much. It is very important. Another foundation that have joined us in preparing for the recovery. This is a Global Heritage Foundation. Today with us, we have Katarina Honcharova, who represents it, a crisis manager here. Hello, can you hear me, dear colleagues?
Architectural heritage, urban heritage, and quite recently, a year ago, with a grant from Helen Frankefeller Foundation, we were able to launch Ukrainian Crisis Response Program. So we were considering, we had to put some rules and criteria to be able to look forward not only to emergency response, not to immediate actions, but also looking forward to midterm and long-term progress and long-term projects, recovery, stabilization whatsoever. So our first priority is security. Therefore, we're working closely with our local partners on the field to make sure that security in all its multidimensional definition is something that we're able to provide through our partnership, and that the trust that our local partners are giving us is not abused. So all the projects are feasible, they're all community-based, and we're trying to launch the community whatever it's possible. And of course, we're trying to work with significant objects. So we're on the stage of listening, and from our Ukrainian lessons, we have to define and articulate that we were absolutely flexible, and that seed grant that was provided to us was ready to go. Therefore, we were able to hit the floor running. Our local partners, I am in Ukraine currently right now, and I'm sitting here with Igor and Olga, and I'm absolutely happy to be here. Therefore, whatever you have questions, please ask. I'm here to communicate with you and to be with you in your hardest times. So, and even the small contribution really makes the difference. And we're trying to make our projects, even though they could be a small one, really meaningful. And what I can say that from Maidan tradition, we are absolutely thrilled working with well-structured non-governmental sectors, with local activists, and with all representative of civic society that are absolutely so stunningly effective and so heroic in their actions that it's simply mind-boggling. So what I would prioritize from our perspective something that following issues. The damage assessment, it's something that needs to be done really fast whenever the security issues resolve and whatever it's possible, because you have to have solid grounds to strategize and to think something in the future. And then, of course, we were able to be flexible in our criteria and in our communication with local partners. What we are happy to do is to provide locally and to communicate globally, because one of our goals is to support local communities and to support local experts, local professional communities through project to project basis. So from my perspective, this international cooperation with Ukrainian colleagues, it's something that sets up a precedent of really efficient and really effective work on the ground while the crisis is still ongoing. So thank you so much. I think we're truly successful. There is a lot of issues that we need to resolve. And as Snezhka said, people come first. We are all fighting for people because we can rebuild pretty much everything, but communities and people is something absolutely irreplaceable. So we're inviting you to join us in our mutual goal to safeguard irreplaceable. Thank you again and looking forward to discussions.
Thank you so much, Katerina. So you said about small projects, about networking, about different smaller initiatives. And I would like to say, I would like to give it over to Birgitte Johansson, Museum Director and head of the Swedish organization, which is called Cultural Heritage Without Borders. Birgitte, please, I give it over to you.
Thank you, Ihor, for your invitation to this very important meeting. And we are very honored to be represented amongst these big and illustrious organizations today. Cultural Heritage Without Borders is a foundation and an independent non-governmental organization. We were founded in 1995. And we are dedicated to the rescue and care for heritage affected by conflict, neglect, disasters, and changes of all kinds. And we are supported by various donors, and we have some equity capital of our own. Today, we are 4 independent organizations, foundations, one in Sweden, where I represent, and the other 3 in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Kosovo. And we have been working in about 10 countries in the world. And we always depart from the needs that affected society itself wants to address. And our experience is that cooperation is fundamental with civil society and organizations at all levels. And we want to promote sustainable socioeconomic and democratic development and the realization of human rights. And we have decided to focus on Ukraine as long as it needs. And the first step we've taken is to try to uphold commitment. Russian state leadership is disrespecting international convention to deliberately destroy a nation's heritage and thus try to rewrite history is a crime against all humanity. And you all know this. This has been said before, but it needs to be said again and again. And what have we done? We have been funding conferences. We have been funding independent journalists who are writing articles about the situation in Ukraine. We have collected money. 6 regional museums in Sweden bought equipment. It was transported to Kiev and Maidan Museum about a week ago. It finally arrived. And it was frequently reported in Swedish national television, radio, articles, etc. So that's commitment. And the next step, we think, is to collect more money, to have contact with donors. I'm not being able to stay more. I'm going to a big cultural policy conference this afternoon, where I will have the opportunity of meeting more donors and talk to them about this initiative. And we are applying for projects together with the other foundations on the Balkans. And we want to have partners in the Ukraine, like the Maidan Museum. So to sum up, uphold the commitment to the cause of Ukraine and to be part of the preparation of the reconstruction of the Ukrainian heritage once the war ends. We are small and we are perhaps a bit slow sometimes, but we are in there for the long term, for long engagement in Ukraine. And a goal for us with our history could be to establish a local office in Kyiv with local officers like the ones in the Balkans to support also the regional and the local heritage in Ukraine. And last but not least, we want to stand by you, to listen to you, to support you in any way we can. And perhaps we could help you finance, if you're interested, to publish the resolution from this meeting. And Sweden is the chair of the European Union this spring, and we are going to meet Swedish authorities next week. And this could be something we could convince them that they could help us, you know, spread this report, this resolution. So thank you very much for inviting us today, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Дякуємо, пані Біргіто, за такі дієві
these active real steps to support Ukraine. And now I would like to invite Katarzyna Zalesinska, Director of the National Institute of Cultural Heritage of Poland. This institution became a strategic partner, not just for Ukraine, but I guess for each of you present here, representing international institutions, because it was Poland that became this hub. And Poland's contribution is invaluable. We are very thankful to the government of Poland, the people of Poland, and Ms. Katarzyna, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Thank you for inviting me. On behalf of my institution, my team also present here today. I can see them on the screen. I would like to share some remarks about our work last year and few remarks about the future. So since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion, well, the priorities for cultural institutions in Poland have changed dramatically. Based on our past experience, we are fully aware that culture is a fundament of our civilization and has to be saved for the sake of our identity, independence, and for the benefit of the future generations. It is why we strongly condemn the attack of Russia against Ukraine, its sovereignty and culture, and act in full solidarity to save Ukrainian statehood, independence, and heritage. Well, in Poland, so severely affected by the Second World War, there is a deep understanding of the mechanisms put in action by the Russian invader. So in response to the unprovoked aggression against Ukraine, Poland immediately engaged all resources possible to support our neighbor. Well, at the very beginning, spontaneous initiatives were a natural and most rapid response to the humanitarian crisis unfolding before our eyes. The civil society reaction was enormous and answered the first very basic needs of Ukrainians. However, in the long run, war requires mobilization of all resources on every government's level, also on the state's level. Already in the first month of the war, Poland's Ministry of Culture and National Heritage created a dedicated unit, the Polish Support Center for Culture in Ukraine. And there are just some few things I would like to share with you about our work. However, there's a lot of friends today that we work every day on an everyday basis. So, well, there are going to be some, general informations. The center is the only example of the government's finance structure tasked with aiding cultural institution in Ukraine. It is a continuation of our bilateral cooperation founded on strong relations as our countries, as you know, share not only a border, but also a historical and cultural legacy, which we want to pass to the future generations. We understand that Ukraine is facing an attack against its sovereignty and state, deliberate destruction of its heritage on a massive scale. In fact, supporting culture in Ukraine, culture which determines Ukrainian distinctiveness and identity, is about preserving the independence of the state. From its early days, the center has focused on providing cultural institutions in Ukraine with the supplies needed to secure their collections. The center also helped Ukrainian partners to plan future activities in reconstruction and recovery. Well, the future of Ukraine, to a large extent, depends on our actions today. This is why building on our past experience, exchanging expertise and discussing a new vision of security architecture for cultural heritage is now a decisive factor for our future. The Polish Support Center for Culture in Ukraine functions within the structure of National Institute of Cultural Heritage, mentioned by Ihor, an expert institution active in the field for 60 years. Over the decades, it has been a place for research, reflection, and a source of expertise on endangered cultural heritage. Well, we are now facing a new chapter, totally new chapter in our history of the institution, of our activities. The advances in new technologies, coupled with the expertise of our specialists gained in Iraq and Afghanistan, in addition to the tens of years of experience of the Polish Conservation School, jointly provide us today with the novel tools and opportunities. I would like to also mention UNESCO Warsaw recommendation on recovery and reconstruction on cultural heritage from 2018. We have to remember that this recommendation recommends professional documentation of the damaged sites, which is the starting point for their effective reconstructions in the future. This is also our task in near future. Many of you mentioned that task today. But we face the challenge of carrying out this action as an international interdisciplinary endeavor, making use of the most modern digital tools. But we need to remember, coming back to Warsaw recommendation, however, that their use of these modern digital tools cannot be a substitute for work on the ground. We need, and this is the main challenge, to build common methodological standards adapted to often very different types of destruction and so different problems that those we have dealt with so far in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. At the same time, we have this opportunity to gather valuable experience and build on it in a new concept of the protection of endangered cultural heritage, much more fully corresponding to the realities of armed conflicts in the 21st century. I would like to also stress that the Russian strategy on targeting civilian infrastructure, unproportional use of military aircraft, heavy artillery, and armored vehicles, the looting that accompanies the occupation, and finally, the cases of intentional systematic destruction on specific categories of monuments and cultural institutions. It constitutes an example of war crimes and will be remembered in the future, in our opinion, together with annihilation of Warsaw in 1944, the blowing up of statues in Banyan in Afghanistan 2001, and destruction of ancient Palmyra devastated by religious extremists in 2016. Therefore, inventorying of cultural losses in Ukraine has two important objectives. First one, to document them as lightly as possible for the sake of the future reconstruction and recovery, as well, and this is the second point, as to collect appropriate evidence, allowing prosecutors to bring the perpetrators to justice in front of appropriate tribunals in the future. And we also see that effective, well-coordinated cooperation with Ukrainian side, especially Ministry of Culture and Information Policy, based on a strong legal and organizational foundation, is the only way to ensure that culture, which determines Ukrainian distinctiveness and identity, is saved. So every day, the Russian invader intentionally destroys signs of Ukrainian identity. I would like to express my sincere thanks to all of you, especially international partners that worked with us last year. I would like to mention, of course, UNESCO, but also many international institutions from Sweden, Finland, France, Spain, or Hungary. And I would like to say to our Ukrainian partners and friends, Poland will continue to support Ukraine and its culture until the victorious end of the war and throughout the challenges of reconstruction, which we have experienced by ourselves. Thank you.
Дуже дякую, пані Катажино. Ми ще працюємо півгодини, оскільки о 13...
Thank you very much, Katarzyna. We have no more than half an hour since at 1 p.m. we are going to start group work. We have some very important you to speak more concisely, and I would like to invite Olena Balun, coordinator of the Ukrainian Art Aid Center in Germany. What Germany is doing to help preserve cultural heritage in Ukraine is very important and very in line with what Katarzyna just spoke about. Thank you, Igor. Thank you all. I am welcoming you from Bavaria, from Germany. Ukrainian Art Aid Center in Germany is a network of scholars, of museums, museum workers, founders, as well as various heritage conservation organizations. Our activity started with a meeting on Zoom, and we hold these meetings until today, every 2 weeks on Wednesdays. And we put together colleagues not just from Germany, but also from Switzerland, Austria, Poland, and so on. And we started speaking with Ukrainian colleagues about what we could do, how we could help. And we started sending the first cargo from Germany. First, these were donations organized by various museums. They provided mostly packaging material. And we were also paying with donations to organize this cargo. And then Germany allocated 3 million euros to finance this aid. Why were we the ones to receive this? Because we were the fastest organization that responded at that time. We worked and keep working not in a bureaucratic way. The fact that we are a network gives us a certain edge here, and our trucks, we work actually with the Ukrainian truck drivers. It wasn't about delivering to Poland and then delivering from Poland. Somehow we were delivering our cargo to Kyiv and to Lviv, and sometimes we also reached Chernivtsi and Odessa. We work directly with volunteers and coordinators in Kyiv. Thank you for showing the map. Over this time, we were able to organize 23 million worth of aid, material aid, which was allocated thanks to Mr. Igor Timets and Ms. Irina Nikiforova to 550 institutions. You see a map of where this aid went. This was climate control, packaging materials, various generators from larger to smaller, uniforms, fire safety means. We sent this to places near the front line, but not only. We help protect museums, churches. We also helped to implement quite a few projects on digitizing cultural heritage. We were able to organize a few 8 projects. There were a few projects to help do repair works in a certain building, organize heating, or a few projects for fire safety of our landmarks in Ukraine. We helped to procure solar panels for Lavra Museum, fire safety for the Golden Gate Museum complex in Kyiv. So we are engaging in aid to various purposes. We are now waiting for a decision of Germany's MFA. We definitely know that this money will be allocated. We don't know when so far. Currently, we are working with donations. The government money is over now, but it will be allocated in the future. Now we are working with donations. We have quite a few donors. Thank you very much for your attention, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Thank you, Olena. Another important strategic partner of Ukraine is, of course, the United States of America. We have organized this list to help our American speakers join later if they could, because the time zone means they had to wake up very early. But despite this, they were with us from the very beginning. So I would like to invite Mr. Glenn Davis, who is the cultural attaché of U.S. Embassy in Kyiv.
Good morning, everyone. And I would like to thank Ihor and Harry for organizing this forum and for inviting the end. The U.S. Department of State looks forward to the working groups and discussions so that we can align U.S. efforts to protect and preserve Ukraine's cultural heritage with the efforts of other international donors in order to meet the needs and priorities of Ukrainian stakeholders, including the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy and all those civil society organizations and individuals who work to safeguard Ukraine's identity through its culture. Our experience in other crises has taught us that donor coordination is critical to effective assistance that achieves sustainable results, as is an accurate assessment of local needs and priorities and strong cooperation with the local government. And I would like to thank the Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister Choyeva for their leadership and collaboration in this endeavor. I will participate from here in Kyiv, and my colleague Martin Perschler, who is the Deputy Director of the Cultural Heritage Office, will participate from Washington. As President Biden said in his State of the Union address last night, Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine has been a test for the entire world to see if we would stand up for the principles of national sovereignty, of the right of people to live free from tyranny, and of democracy itself. He complimented the courage of the Ukrainian people, and he pledged once again American support for Ukraine, saying, "We will stand with you as long as it takes." Since February 24th, 2022, the United States has contributed $45 billion in security and humanitarian assistance to help Ukraine win the war. Now, Russia's war aims not only to take Ukraine's territory and deprive it of its sovereignty, but also its independent national identity. Putin made this clear in his Crimea speech in 2014, and Russian leaders continue, even up till today, to emphasize that Ukrainians do not have a separate history or culture. The exhibition mounted by Harry of damaged artifacts at the Lavra directly links the destruction to these Russian attempts to repress Ukrainian democracy and independence since the Maidan. And for that reason, cultural sites and objects that demonstrate an independent culture are not just collateral damage, but direct targets of Russian aggression and defending Ukraine also entails defending its culture. This is not secondary to the war effort, but part of it. To help Ukraine win the war means to help it protect its cultural identity. Assistant Secretary for Educational and Cultural Affairs Lee Satterfield has so far secured expanded additional funding for us to support cultural heritage protection, preservation, and recovery in Ukraine. We are engaged now in conversations with the ministry and other stakeholders on the most strategic and effective way to provide this assistance, and we hope that the conversations today will help in that regard. I would like to conclude just by announcing today that the State Department will soon start accepting and reviewing proposals on a rolling basis through the U.S. Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation to carry out rapid damage assessments, stabilization, and recovery work on cultural sites damaged during the invasion. In this way, we hope to respond better to and more quickly to Ukrainian needs. I think, as you know, that program is a yearly program, and we've already collected proposals back in December, but we're changing it this year to make it more responsive, to have more funding specifically directed and dedicated to Ukraine. So you'll see that announcement on the embassy website soon, and we encourage people who have specific projects that need funding to tell us and send those to us. And that's it. Thanks, Ihor.
Дякуємо, пане Девіс. І ви згадали оцінка втрат, і мені здається, що Україні, напевно, один з найпотужніших партнерів.
Thank you so much, Mr. Davis. It seems to me that one of the key partners here in Ukraine is the US, and we also have among our partners US partners. And now I would like to give it over to Richard Kurin, the ambassador at large of Smithsonian's Distinguished Scholar. And I would like to give it over to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ihor, and thank you for inviting us. And thank you to Katerina and the minister. And it's good to see a lot of friends and colleagues who've been part of this. I think, as Glenn Davis just said, this really is literally a cultural war. This is about the freedom of people to be who they are and who they want to be. It's so fundamental. So on one hand, it is about Ukraine, and I had the honor of being in Ukraine in 1990. I saw so palpably the Ukrainian independence movement and drive for freedom at that time, and it's even stronger today. But as people have pointed out, this is really a bigger fight. It's the human right, about the human right to culture. When you've thanked us, Ihor, the ministry has thanked us, Ukrainians have thanked us, but we thank you. We all thank you. Because as President Zelensky said when he addressed the US Congress, this is not about charity. This is about the Ukrainians being on the front line of a much larger fight for human justice, dignity, and freedom. And so you are fighting for us. Now, I think the response to culture always is very local at first. It's about people and their institutions. It's about museum and library directors getting their stuff secured in the face of bombing and shelling. It's about local communities who find those cultural institutions so important. And then it's about the development of an ecosystem where people come together. And we've seen an amazing coming together of private groups, of non-governmental groups, of associations, organizations. And you know, part of it is planned and part of it is not. Part of it is very organic. This meeting is part of that continuing organic nature of how we develop an ecosystem for dealing with culture under threat. And as the minister began the meeting and said, culture is a matter of national security, it surely is. And I think all of us want to see, organizations, governments, and so on, organizing well ahead of a crisis. The time to fix your roof is not when it's raining; it's before it rains. And so I think one of my takeaways of this and other crises has been that advanced planning should be done, and it should be taken as a government responsibility to do that. Not that government will do it alone. Indeed, much of the sector is handled privately and at a community level, but we do need to have better advanced planning for what we do. Now, we at the Smithsonian have been in from the beginning and providing, and people have said it, part of that ecosystem of providing and mobilizing supplies and equipment. We've been very happy to do that. And we've been working closely, as Ihor knows, with he and Vasil and Harry in getting supplies in, and also with Svetlana Strelnikova and the National Ukrainian Center for Research and Restoration that does a lot of conservation work around the country. And we found surprising partners to help us. When we needed vehicles to get conservators around the country, it was Uber who came to the rescue. So there's been some surprising partnerships that we've discovered and we need to hold going forward. We've provided a lot of advice to our Ukrainian colleagues and conservators, and we've done a lot with satellite monitoring. And we've talked a good bit about the documentation of war crimes. So we have been doing that from the beginning. And the sad part of that, I think, Ihor, you had mentioned, I think about 11 or 1,200 sites. So far, our count is over 1,200. Our count is over 1,600 places where we think we have evidence of either damage or destruction. And that might not be the full extent of it, and it happens every day. We've also been documenting, the episode at the Kherson Museum and the looting, and, it's amazing with satellite photography, you can actually see the trucks pulling up to the museum to take out those 10,000 items and bring them to a Russian-controlled museum in Crimea. So we are gathering evidence. We're working closely with our partners at the State Department, the Conflict Observatory, so that we can indeed hold people accountable for targeting of cultural heritage, which is, as people have said, a war crime. We've also hosted Fulbrights, Ukrainian Fulbrights. Ihor was a Fulbright back when. He was a younger guy, but at the Smithsonian. But we've been hosting Fulbrights at the Smithsonian that have been marooned in the United States. And we continue to do exhibitions and programs and publish items so as to keep the American people informed about what's happening in Ukraine, so that support continues to flow for your battle. Again, echoing my colleague Glenn Davis at the State Department, as President Biden said last night in his State of the Union, we will keep at this as long as it takes. And you, my friends in Ukraine, have our commitment that we stand with you for as long as it takes. Thank you.
Щиро дякую, пане Куріне.
Thank you so much, Richard, for your kind words, for your support. You highlighted an important thing, an advanced planning. Before the war has started actually in 2014, I have learned about a model, about the concept of family. We represent this family. Michael Kaiser and Brett Egan, who were leading the Institute of Art Management, and Brett Egan, the president of Art Management Institute, is here with us, and I would like to give it over to him. Brett Egan.
Igor, thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you for the honor of being part of this discussion. My name is Brett Egan. I'm the president of the DeVos Institute of Arts Management at the University of Maryland. Our offices are based in Washington, D.C. Our work was founded at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in 2001. We focus explicitly and only on planning for the cultural sector, heritage organizations, and business resilience of arts, culture, heritage, and educational institutions in the United States and in support of colleagues, governments, and ministries worldwide. I'm here today to express our team's solidarity with you, with the people of Ukraine, and with the visionary and perseverant leaders of the emergency response, and to offer our resources in cultural sector planning and long-term capitalization and business resilience, if they may be useful at the appropriate time. We understand, of course, the first and necessary focus in respect to culture and heritage is the emergency response, a valiant and heroic effort that we understand goes on daily and that is supported by a global response represented in no small part on this call that represents a heroic focus and dedication of our colleagues in Ukraine and the wisdom, experience, and resources of thousands of professionals worldwide, including so many of you on today's conference. We're inspired by the immense contributions of our colleagues here who have been involved alongside Eddie and others on the ground in Ukraine in these most difficult days facing Ukraine in its fight for the preservation of life and the core of civil society, its heritage, education, and cultural facilities, objects, and programs. At the same time, as we observe and support this emergency response as the absolute priority, we are also inspired and take as direction the visionary words of President Zelensky in his remarks in Lugano in July of 2022, when he speaks to the importance of beginning to envision the recovery and rebuilding of Ukraine, and his foregrounding of the importance of culture and education in that effort. He reminds us that, quote, rebuilding Ukraine means restoring the principles of life, restoring the space of life, restoring what makes people people. Of course, this means construction, large-scale construction. Of course, this means large funding and colossal investments. He continues, in addition to everything else, it will allow us to create millions of new connections in the democratic world and Europe between our countries. Every city, every community, every industry that will be rebuilt will have a historical record of who helped it. Just imagine these are not just flags of the partner country at the entrance to the city, but being woven into the new fabric of life in Ukraine, traditions and heritage of all those who worked on reconstruction. Therefore, the reconstruction of Ukraine is not a local project, not a project of one nation, but a joint task of the entire democratic world, of all countries, certainly all countries that can say about themselves, we are civilized. When the time comes, a strategic plan for recovery, capitalization, and modernization of the sector, which we stand by to support in whichever way serves the interests of the people of Ukraine, will set the groundwork for a coordinated effort that marshals the collective power and goodwill of, first, the resources, people, and leadership inherent to Ukraine, and secondly, the international community of stakeholders who honor the culture of Ukraine as inextricable with the culture of Europe and the world. In this effort, we take as guidance again the words of the president at Lugano when he provides the following guidelines for planning for recovery, quote, and among the key principles, I would note the following: maximum security, maximum technologies, maximum compliance with environmental standards, maximum use of green technologies, maximum implementation of barrier-free principles, maximum focus on community interests, maximum transparency in planning, use of funds, selection of projects, as well as maximum rooting of the reconstruction project in the real economic life of Ukraine. We heed this call to recognize the importance of a long-term strategic plan that begins early to envision and organize the roles and actions of people and organizations, the redevelopment and advancement of necessary systems, the marshaling of public and private capital, and indeed the rehabilitation and construction of buildings that will be needed to advance heritage and culture in a post-war recovery setting. And it is in this spirit that we stand with humility and solidarity with you in Ukraine, and in humble partnership with our colleagues on this call, ready to assist in the facilitation for the advancement of a plan for post-war recovery and modernization of the Ukrainian cultural sector, in service to the needs and priorities of the Ukrainian people, and in alignment with the directions of President Zelensky, recognizing the necessary and heroic current focus on emergency response, and also the opportunity of forming a clear vision for mobilization of recovery when that time inevitably comes. Thank you, Ihor. Thank you, colleagues.
Дякую, пане Ігоне, за ці слова. І, звичайно, ми розуміємо, що
Thank you so much, Brett, for these words. Of course, the war is not about preserving cultural heritage, cultural objects or facilities and people. And this is also preparation for recovery. This is about traumatic memory. Let me invite here Linda Norris, who represents International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. Thank you.
Thanks, Ihor, and thanks to all of you who've organized this amazing gathering of people. I'm at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience, but equally important, 14 years ago on a really cold January day, I arrived in Ukraine as a Fulbright scholar, and I have been lucky enough to work with, learn from, and support Ukrainian culture and heritage colleagues all over the country through a wide variety of projects through the years. It's great to see many familiar faces here. But a site of conscience is a place of memory, a historic site, a museum, or a memory initiative that prevents erasures from happening in order to foster a more just and humane society. Not only do sites of conscience provide safe spaces to remember, but they enable their visitors and communities to make connections between the past and human rights issues today. Now the coalition has more than 350 members in more than 65 countries around the world, including the Maidan Museum. And this means that many places have done what Ukraine is doing now, thinking about how to tell the story of these difficult times, how to memorialize those who are lost, but most importantly, how to make memorials and to think about memory in ways that are both about memory and the future. The Haudenosaunee people, the Native Americans in my part of the United States, hold as a key principle the concept of 7 generations, to consider that decisions made in our time are not just for us, but for many generations to come, 7 generations more. That's the challenge now presented to all of us who care about Ukraine. How can we consider cultural heritage thinking forwards, not just preserving in amber some sort of past, in fact, not just in triumph, as I know it will come, but also in ways that encourage peacemaking and community building. I, at one point, wrote an article for a museum journal in 2014 about what the Museum of Maidan should be. And I proposed that it be a dialogic place where people could come together. Ihor and the team at Maidan embraced that concept. And I want to suggest now that in a free, safe, and independent Ukraine, we build places not just to glorify the past, but to celebrate and foster the amazing spirit that your country has shown all of us. If there are to be monuments, they should be, yes, to soldiers, but also to the old women who bake bread, the museums who host events in their bomb shelters, the poet, the filmmakers, everyone who raises money to support the military in the everyday. This, the spirit of your people, is and has been a part of your cultural heritage. At the coalition, we stand ready to help in any way we can as cultural heritage and memory draw hand in hand, and we draw from the knowledge of our members around the world. Most immediately, the coalition is very pleased to be working in support of an ICOM grant with other ICOM committees on a project to build the capacity of the staff and communities at small and mid-sized museums to help their staff and their communities understand trauma and make a contribution to healing effort. Those learnings will not only be useful in Ukraine, but be shared with our global museum community. And I should say, thanks to the Maidan Museum, the coalition's toolkit about memorialization processes is available in Ukrainian. And on a personal level, to finish, I can only express my deepest admiration and care for all of you. I personally will continue to help in any way I can. And I very much look forward to when I can return to Ukraine to work with you all again. Thank you.
Щиро дякуємо, пані Ліндо. І запрошую до слова пані Елейн Human-Gurian.
Thank you so much, Linda. I would also like to give it over to Elaine Human-Gurian, who took an important part in the process of memorialization traumatic history in Ukraine. So please, over to you, Elaine.
Thank you. Thank you to all. My name is Elaine Human-Gurian, and I would like to speak about the individuals. While I am incredibly impressed to be here among all these organizations and thank Ihor for all the work that he has done, in the end, it is overwhelming to many of our citizens, and Linda Norris and I often talk about what is one-to-one. How can you help on a level that is much smaller? And I'm thrilled to be coming to you from a tiny island in Vieques, Puerto Rico. which is in the Caribbean. It has a population of 9,000 people. In our town's business section, there is a very big handwritten sign that says, "Peace to Ukraine," in Spanish, and I had nothing to do with this. So even in the most remote and seemingly uninvolved location, people hope that you will be victorious and retain your independence in the face of this unspeakable and unprovoked hostility. This island was directly hit by Maria, and the United States did not come to help for 11 days. This island, therefore, self-organized. And self-organized is a term that this conference is about. And what we know 5 years afterwards is that we are, because of our own self-organization, more self-assured, brave, and have more infrastructure than we would have had we been reliant on all the organizations to come in. So I want to thank Ihor and my friends in Ukraine who organized the possibility for all of you to get together and who organized by self-organizing your ability to work in the country. Excuse me. We on the island admire those who create the systems to save themselves in the face of terrible circumstances. And that is what you, my Ukrainian friends, have done. You have identified that culture is the heartbeat of every people. And to preserve the evidence is to keep the people alive, evolving, and affecting others. Your museums, historic houses, and artifacts are evidence of your existence and the emblems of your resilience and perseverance. The desire on the Kremlin's part to cause cultural genocide will fail because of your work. And I salute you all for keeping the very heartbeat of Ukraine alive now and forevermore. Because I have worked in your country for a long time, I have learned much from you. I have learned that making one's presence known, even without functioning organizations and open buildings, creates community and consolidates energy for survival. You are the kings and queens of open air and pop-up exhibitions, classes, and ceremonies. You are our teachers, and I thank you for teaching us all. And how can we help you? A long time ago, when we were overwhelmed here, Linda Norris and I had a conversation about what kind of direct help can individuals who are not part of these big and august organizations, even though I have been personally involved in big organizations, what can they do? And we thought of a concept called one-to-one. One-to-one, which is find somebody you trust and help them. It's an idea quite easily to understand. And we have found within our citizens that people have come to help somebody directly. And that is what I would like to represent as an addition to your very august conversation. Send your support directly to one person at a time, help a person, an organization, a community, an independent bus driver. Someone will be helping someone else. Do not ask permission. This country and should be saved, and one-to-one will help. I worry about your safety. I'm thrilled to see my friends well. I am eager to help on a basis that is not organizational only, though I applaud all your work, but to keep telling our citizens around the world that they can also help directly by finding somebody they trust and helping them. I pray for peace for Ukraine on its own terms, and thank you for teaching us how to preserve, and by extension, our culture and our future. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Елейн.
Thank you very much, ladies. from the American team, we also have the ICOM NPR president. So please, you're welcome to say just a few words, you may.
15 years ago, I was visiting Lavra with Ihor, and you can see my picture here. We all know this ancient monastery that was mentioned earlier, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We were taking time out from a robust week-long seminar called Museums, Exhibitions, Communications, and Public Outreach. This was 15 years ago. And some of the museums didn't even have computers yet at that point in time. It involved museum directors from all over Ukraine at the Ivan Honchar Museum and National Center of Folk Culture. On the last, and this is the group, we had a great time. And then on the last day, we toasted to the future and power of Ukrainians to preserve and interpret their heritage. Today, I am chairing the International Council of Museums, International Committee for Marketing and Public Relations. We have a network of 500 members working in museum communications and fundraising in all regions of the globe. At ICOM's 26th General Conference in Prague, Ihor gave the keynote address at our first session that was called The Power of Museums to Inspire Hope. I invited him because of the model that you are presenting in Ukraine of innovation, inclusivity, resourcefulness, and perseverance, and you're creating it in real time in a war zone. Richard Curran earlier mentioned ecosystems, and in terms of communications, I'm thinking of some other models around the world, such as the work being done by indigenous peoples who are fighting a different kind of war on the front lines of the Amazon, saving the natural and cultural heritage of the Americas. I am thinking of a lot of ideas today, such as the creation, could there be a creation of a digital news bureau of cultural heritage, perhaps in partnership with the Smithsonian or other organizations here today, that could report in real time what's happening on the ground in a journalistic fashion and how your endeavors are being supported by this incredible network we see here today, all of the efforts. So I look forward to learning what ICOM NPR can do in collaboration with others to win more hearts and souls and continue engaging a worldwide audience that will support you for as long as it takes and beyond. I look forward to coming back to Ukraine and toasting again in Kyiv. And thank you so much for inviting me and for organizing this important and timely global forum.
Дуже дякуємо. У нас ще є важливі дуже
записи. Thank you very much. We have important video recordings from representatives of Getty Foundation, California University of Los Angeles. We will include them in the video recording of our meeting. We have to proceed to working groups. I would like to invite Olha Honchar, the person who is the cultural hero, I would say. Many of you know her very well. She is the founder and director of the Museum Crisis Center. Olha, the closing speeches for you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your invitation. Thank you to all our Ukrainian colleagues who are working in the sector of protecting cultural heritage. I would like to join in on everything that my colleagues said. And finally, I would like to say that my colleagues said a lot about the importance of people and how people of culture, people who generate meanings are important. I think out of all cultural figures, museum workers stayed in Ukraine most because we cannot leave our museums behind. We cannot leave our foundations behind. And very often, colleagues stayed even in the most difficult circumstances, protecting museums, protecting exhibitions, collections, sometimes on the brink of life and death. Currently, our museum sector has been endangered by the Russian aggression. Russia is a terrorist state and it commits genocide of the Ukrainian people. I urge all our partners to use this terminology specifically, because this is a specific evil that has a specific name. This is the Russian Federation. And what is happening is genocide of the Ukrainian people. As for my colleagues, from the very first days of the war, we occupy this niche that we provide one-time individual support to museum workers who remain in Ukraine. Currently, our network includes over 1,200 individual cases of support of museum workers from 10 regions and 100 museums. This includes occupied territories. And the Museum Crisis Center sees that there is a reduction of payments to museum workers who remain in Ukraine. People are furloughed, people are made redundant. There are no financial bonuses that we used to have. The average salary of museum workers is $50, $100, $200 a month. This is the reality that we live in. And when we speak about the importance of people, I think providing for the real needs of museum workers in Ukraine is very important. The Museum Crisis Center has handed out about 202 million hryvnias of aid throughout the year. Something is what we raised with the help of international partners. But of course, in addition to international aid, in this format, it's very important that at the state level, we should have this issue regulated, because people of culture are also targets of destruction and persecution by Russia. And the Museum Crisis Center provided aid for evacuation of cultural figures who left Ukraine. And we actually started with giving people money just to buy petrol to evacuate museum objects. The war is still ongoing and threatens not just museums and artifacts, but also people of culture who are under the threat of Russian terrorists, who are on the list for physical destruction. And museums in the occupied territories, museums that haven't been destroyed, turned into propaganda centers. This means that the Russian occupation authorities come to the museum and turn it into their centers of political propaganda, putting in logos of Tretyakov Gallery. So I have this question to international organizations about the status of Russia in UNESCO. It's time to make the decision. The status of Russia in ICOM and other international organizations. It's time to make the decision, because Russian terrorists have no place in the international community. The war in Ukraine changes the world. It changes not just Ukraine. And the Ukrainian heritage is part of the global heritage and the European heritage. If Ukraine loses, the entire world loses. There is a lot of work ahead of us. There is another difficult year coming on in Ukraine. So I urge everyone to work. Ukrainians never give up. This is something that we know, we inspire the entire world, but your help is also important because we cannot handle this alone. Thank you. Thank you, Olha. And here I would like to wrap up our session, but this is just the beginning of our forum. And suggestions, we will definitely take them into account in the draft resolution that we will send you for your comments and suggestions so that we can develop a specific document. It will help us move forward effectively, at least this year. We are going to continue our work in closed working groups. Why closed? Because it will enable us to speak about things that maybe we don't want to discuss in public, particularly due to safety considerations. And based on the result of our work in 5 thematic groups, tomorrow we are going to discuss this at 3 thematic groups. And the evening, there will be a briefing in Ukraine Forum, the Ukraine Information Agency. There will be a briefing to sum up the preliminary results. So thank you once again for these inspiring words and this powerful start for our forum. Today is not a lot to be faced. On the other hand, we understand that time has completely changed for Ukraine. Like Olo has said, a lot of things changed for us, and we hope for the world as well. So we are working in this half emergency mode, saving the resources, saving the electricity. So thank you once again for your strong support, and we hope that indeed we are going to win, culture will prevail, and Ukraine will prevail. Thank you. We are also thankful to the armed forces of Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine. I invite you to work in working groups for those who can. Please follow further announcements, news. Thank you. See you.
Greetings to the participants of the War in Ukraine Battle for Culture Forum. I'm Glenn Wharton, chair of the UCLA Getty Interdepartmental Program in the Conservation of Cultural Heritage, a graduate program at the University of California, Los Angeles, focusing on the study and care of cultural heritage objects. We're all horrified by the events and casualties in Ukraine that have been on our airwaves over the past year. We're equally in awe of the resistance and strength of the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian institutions in the face of this brutal invasion. Attending to medical emergencies and loss of life is always top priority. But we in the cultural heritage conservation field argue that cultural heritage comes next. In this brief video, I don't have time for a full lecture on the significance of cultural heritage to personal and national identity or the formation of cultural memory. Besides, you all know this, otherwise you wouldn't be at this forum. As is often the case in times of war, there's no time to prepare careful inventories, perform photo documentation, pack and protect movable and immovable objects, and transport them to safer grounds prior to an invasion. From my outsider perspective, your focus on documenting crimes of war, conducting inventories, applying first aid to damaged materials, and building short and long-term strategies is exactly what's called for. There are already a number of US and international efforts that are helping in Ukraine, such as the creation of collections care videos, translation of literature into Ukrainian, and donations of equipment. I also know of individuals such as Yuri Yanchushin, a Ukrainian-American furniture conservator in New York, who is devoting considerable time and energy in support of the work that you're doing. Rather than spending my time and yours recounting these efforts, I'd like to say a word about one long-term strategy that's no doubt in your minds, and that's the education and training for short-term transmission of skills and knowledge, as well as long-term education of professional conservators. There are a number of professional organizations and nonprofit organizations in Europe and North America that provide workshops on the care of cultural heritage. There are also master's and PhD programs across Europe and North America that provide small cohorts of students with advanced degrees, such as our program at UCLA. To prepare for this brief video presentation, I communicated with program directors of the Association of North American Graduate Programs in Conservation. They expressed hope that Ukrainian students will check out our program websites and admissions requirements and communicate with us if they're interested in pursuing graduate level training in our programs. There may be other ways that we can help as well, such as hosting visits from conservators from Ukraine, or even conserving artworks and cultural heritage materials from Ukraine in our courses. We're open to many possibilities. Of course, funding must be procured to support these efforts, but I believe that the support will come. An additional point I'd like to make concerning education is that many of you are accomplished researchers and educators and conservators. In due time, I and my colleagues in North America look forward to learning from you about the care of cultural heritage during times of war. We have a lot to learn together from the brave and important work that you're undertaking. I wish you the very best over the next 2 days as you address the immediate concerns of damaged and stolen Ukrainian cultural heritage. And I send my heartfelt wishes for the difficult work you are undertaking in such adverse conditions.
Hello, I'm Joan Weinstein, Director of the Getty Foundation, and I bring you greetings from my many colleagues here on our campus in Los Angeles, California. I'm sorry I am not with you live, but the time difference really made that virtually impossible. First of all, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary efforts of the organizers of this international forum in bringing together so many stakeholders and so much expertise, all in service of protecting Ukraine's collections, archives, libraries, historic buildings, and monuments. We come together from across the globe because we recognize that the assaults on cultural heritage in Ukraine are not only a tragedy, but a concerted effort to eliminate symbols of Ukrainian heritage and identity. They are intended to destroy a society by eradicating its history and memory. While emergency funding is not the core of the Getty's work, we knew we needed to be part of the effort to help Ukrainian colleagues protect their heritage. As we are so very far away geographically, we turn to a trusted partner, Alif. We are particularly grateful for Alif's attention to the seriousness and urgency of requests for support, turning inquiries into financial assistance as quickly as possible for everything from emergency storage for vulnerable collections to weatherproofing against the threats of winter cold and fire risk that we understand pose real dangers. For those of you who may not know the Getty, I want to take just a few moments to tell you about it. We are an international cultural and philanthropic organization based in Los Angeles, but active in many parts of the world. We're comprised of a museum, a research institute in the history of art, a conservation institute, and a grant-making foundation. Several of my colleagues from the Conservation Institute will be joining in workshops today, and together the Getty Research Institute and the Getty Foundation have been focused on supporting Ukrainian colleagues, art historians in Ukraine. To be honest, it's very hard to find the right words to say today that would not ring hollow. It would be inauthentic for me to say from the safety and comfort of my office here in Los Angeles that I understand even a fraction of the hardship and suffering those of you in Ukraine are experiencing every day. But I can say with all honesty that you are in our thoughts, that we follow your progress daily, and that we recognize the invaluable contributions Ukraine has made to our world's heritage. These contributions must be preserved, not just for your future, but for our common future. I wish you a successful forum, much courage, and I hope to be with you again in better times.
Good evening. My name is Lori Kane-Hart, and I'm director of the Center for European and Russian Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, and professor of anthropology and global studies. I want to thank the Maidan Museum, Ihor Poshivailo, and the International Forum on the Safety of Cultural Heritage in Times of War for this urgent symposium on the battle for culture in Ukraine. I also want to give my personal thanks to Ihor for participating in our center's colloquium in LA at the Getty Center in November on the war in Ukraine and the legacy of Bosnia. We thank everyone at this forum for what you're doing under the worst of circumstances to document, track, and take action against the destruction of memory and cultural heritage and the deformation of history that are central objectives of this war. We know from previous wars how urgent it is to engage in this work in a timely, public, and total way in order to prevent the appropriation, the manipulation, and the annihilation of deeply embedded local cultural production in the past and in the present. The insights that you gain, the actions that you take to broadcast the processes occurring as we speak are critical not only to the preservation of the past, but even more importantly, to ensuring the integrity of a future that resists partisan manipulation and propagandistic rewriting. It's the most enormous challenge to stay true to the complex and multi-stranded, multicultural realities and testimonies of the national treasures that are and will be under assault by partisan forces during and after the war. All of us at UCLA stand with and behind you. We are heartbroken at the loss of life. We are heartbroken at the ecological and material destruction that you're battling. But we are confident that with the leadership of thinkers, activists, scholars, and creative artists such as yourselves, and with the support of the international community, you are also making the groundwork for a dynamic, open, and inclusive Ukrainian cultural future for all your citizens. We hope that you can stay safe as you do this work. We wish you a productive conference, and thank you so much.
Minister Tkachenko, Deputy Minister Chueva, and distinguished colleagues, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to join you today to recognize the outstanding efforts and resilience of our colleagues in the Ukrainian heritage community and to discuss what needs to be done in the months ahead. At this moment, we are charged with the task of shaping an agenda for the future of heritage preservation in Ukraine. This challenge is daunting. Russia's war of choice continues. The moment requires new political, social, and monetary commitments. It demands new directions of thinking and mechanisms of action. Our work must emphasize the centrality of collaboration and be attentive to human rights and to human needs. The moment demands that we be better friends to culture. Friendship is an easy word to say, but true friendship is very, very hard. Friendship is crucial to cooperation between countries, organizations, and institutions. It is vital to successful interventions in war and to post-war reconstruction. It implies sincere and meaningful relationships from people from Brussels to Kyiv, from Washington to Lviv, from Baltimore to Odessa. It means committing not only to caring for heritage, but to an ethic of caring for the people who care about heritage. And I am convinced that sincere bonds of genuine connection, shared by people of goodwill, are the foundation for the future protection of cultural heritage in Ukraine. Led by the dedication of our Ukrainian friends, we have shared over the past 12 months a sense of purpose and the hope that something of Ukraine's culture might be preserved for the future. Anthropologists like me often question what motivates someone in this situation. And what they have found is that it is because people have hope and have internalized an ethics of care built on a working partnership of recovering, relieving, and reconstructing. This is how hope can be found in the midst of war. This meeting and the success of Ukraine's cultural sector now and in the future must reflect a transnational partnership of recovery, relief, and reconstruction, the beginning of which is now. To our Ukrainian friends, to the Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, to the Museum Crisis Center, your efforts continue to inspire us. We are now at an inflection point in this war. Thanks to you, Much has now been sandbagged, salvaged, or stabilized. Successful initiatives at this stage begin to focus on specific tasks, specific places, or specific goals. There can and should be many new dedicated initiatives that develop into strong and lasting international friendships to sustain Ukraine from this emergency moment into reconstruction and beyond. To our international friends, we must take seriously the fact that friendship requires work. Friendships are forged through action as much as they are through empathy. Our challenge is to meet and collaborate with our Ukrainian colleagues in these locally inspired initiatives. We would do well to remember the lesson of the Second World War. Cultural reconstruction came not through countrywide initiatives, but through strong city-to-city, museum-to-museum, and university-to-university collaborations. The friendships formed then have been durable, and we are going to need a great many more friends who are inspired to action now. Even as we survey the challenges now facing Ukraine, I remain hopeful for the reason that there are so many people here whose homes and heritage were targets today, yesterday, and perhaps in the coming months, who are all looking to take real, concrete action. And when I see how friendship turns to hope, I recall the words of the poet Adrienne Rich, who 45 years ago offered these words of consolation and of promise. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Thank you.